Hi, thanks for joining me for a discussion about starting a teen podcast in your library. My name is Lori Conforti, teen librarian at the Glenwood branch of Howard County Library System. In this video, I will discuss how you can involve teens in podcast content creation, what technologies I have used for effective podcasting, how we have shifted to produce our podcast recordings virtually, and how to measure success with your podcast. Our teen podcast called HocoCast got started as part of an internal grant process that was looking for innovative programs. As part of the grant application process, we identified a variety of reasons to start a teen podcast, such as it would help create connected learning opportunities for teens. It would create opportunities for teens to learn from adults and from each other. And it would design learning opportunities around teens' goals and interests. Also, the podcast would result in a final product that is a part of our library's community education outreach and would provide new content for our customers. In May 2019, we were awarded a small budget to get this project started. Our very first episode was a teen takeover of the library's established podcast, Hijinks, and we were fortunate to be able to interview acclaimed author Nikki Grimes. Our official first episode as HocoCast featured a local student who won a national prize for her project at the National History Day competition. When I got started with this podcast, I needed to find teens who might be interested in this project. I recruited teens from my summer reading volunteers, writing groups, teen advisory board, and the wider community. My message to teens was that their participation would give them a platform to share their voice, opinions, and ideas, build valuable communication skills, showcase their contributions to the community, provide opportunities for learning new technologies, and of course, provide those always valuable service hour opportunities. Once you have recruited your teen podcasters, you will need to provide a variety of tools to help them plan and produce the podcast. We created a set of editorial guidelines that informs our content and sets parameters for our podcast segments. Next was deciding the content for the podcast. Your teens will drive what this ultimately looks like. The group of teens that started HocoCast back in August 2019 wanted to focus on books and the community as the format of our podcast, which led us to centering each episode around a theme. The teens often reach out to members in the community that can speak to that theme, and then we conduct an interview. They also write and record book and media reviews related to our episode topic. Your podcast format may look very different based on the interests of the teens who participate at your library. Regardless of the format your podcast takes, I strongly recommend using a storyboard or outline for each episode. The storyboard is our most important planning document. It lives in a shared folder, which makes it flexible for teens to collaborate and add their content at their convenience. If we have an interview scheduled, the storyboard is where they write their questions. If there is a conversation segment, the storyboard is where they outline the theme of their discussion. And the storyboard is where they share their written book and other media reviews. The storyboard also helps us produce a transcript of the podcast for full accessibility. If book reviews are part of your podcast, then provide some guidance and practice to help teens craft compelling and interesting book reviews. You may ask them to submit their reviews to you for editing or set up peer editing. Again, your group of teens will determine what steps you might need to take to help them learn review writing skills. Find out what the teens are interested in and use that for podcast segment ideas. One of our most successful interviews was with a local ghost tour operator, Rissa Miller. She came dressed up in her historical costume, as seen in the picture here. Her interview was so engaging because the teens really were genuinely curious about the paranormal activity in their own community. Our teens have also driven the content in our most recent August 2020 episode, which reflected the racial turmoil of the summer's Black Lives Matters protests, and our October episode, which focused on teen mental health. Our teens took the lead in contacting experts in the community for interviews on both of these episodes, and the content truly represented what was important to them. It may be a leap of faith, but I find it's important to assist only when necessary. My voice is never heard on the podcast. The teens record everything, and I only provide the scheduling of recordings for interviews in our library's Zoom classroom and the editing. I may nudge them with a few ideas for episode themes, but ultimately, this is their podcast, and I let them take the lead. Finally, share feedback and praise with your teens. As the advisor for HoCoCast, I often receive a variety of community feedback on each episode. It is so important for teens to know the impact they are having. Hearing comments and praise from adults builds confidence and helps them feel proud of their contributions. Let's take a look at the basics needed to get started with your own podcast. At the very least, you will need a microphone to record and a computer with editing software. For HoCoCast, the library provided me with a repurposed MacBook laptop, 2 portable Tascam recording devices, and a backpack to store everything. You may also want to invest in a USB microphone, depending on your needs. So research the options available for podcasting equipment that will fit your budget. As part of our grant application, the goal was for this podcast equipment to be portable. That way, all of our branches would be able to invite their teens to produce content for HoCoCast. Hopefully, once the pandemic restrictions are lifted, we can fully engage with teens in all of our branches using this equipment. If you have the space and the budget for a dedicated recording studio, there are additional technologies that would be helpful for you to acquire. If you have any questions about setting up a dedicated studio space, please reach out to me using the contact information listed at the end of this presentation, and I'll direct you to our communications team for specific guidance. We started work on our first HoCoCast episode in August 2019, recording several interviews and segments in the branch using our small children's story room and not a dedicated recording space. The acoustics are less than ideal in this location, and our first attempts at recording sounded awful. It was like we were speaking into tin cans. So I improvised a mock soundproof studio setup. With several blankets from the children's department, we created a blanket fort studio using a puppet theater, a book cart, a rolling whiteboard, and other items to create an enclosed space, which eliminated the tin can echoing sound on our recordings. Since the pandemic started, we have found using a blanket can even work well for teens recording from home. If teens find their voice memo recordings have an echo, I encourage them to record under a blanket or even in their closet. No fancy sound dampening equipment necessary. 1 week after the library closed down last March, we were slated to interview a local environmental activist for our Earth Day podcast. Fortunately, we were able to quickly pivot to using Zoom for recording our interview sessions. Of course, you can use Google Meet or another platform that works with your system. The benefits of recording this way are that it is very flexible and accessible. Teens can record their own segments and book reviews at their convenience, and most teens already have a device to record voice memos. However, if they don't have a phone, we have the option to record via Zoom, which is how we have recorded interviews with community members and the teen conversation segments. Prior to the pandemic, scheduling teens in person for recording sessions at the branch was a bit like herding cats. The plus side of recording remotely is that it allows teens to record when it works for their schedule. Also, it allows me to offer this opportunity to any teen in the entire county, not just teens with transportation to my branch. Another convenient way for us to work while being remote is through a shared folder where teens can collaborate together on planning the episode and they can upload their remote recordings when they are ready to be edited. Using a combination of Zoom recording and teens recording individual segments from home has worked well for us. With only remote recording, HoCoCast has produced 5 full episodes, one every other month since April 2020. Once you have recorded your segments, what do you need to produce the final episode? As part of the innovation grant, the library also provided a license for Adobe Audition software to edit our audio files. However, there are free audio editing options available, such as Audacity, that also can enable you to edit a podcast episode at no cost. There is a learning curve for any of these editing programs, but I have found it is not too difficult to master. What is difficult is the amount of time needed to edit an episode. I would estimate at least 10 to 12 hours total for an hour-long podcast. While it can be tedious to edit, it makes the final product seamless and sound very professional. Currently, I am responsible for editing all of our episodes since we only have one license for the Adobe Audition software, and it lives on the podcast laptop, which I cannot give out during the pandemic. If you have a teen who is interested in editing, this can be a great way for them to contribute. And my hope for the future is that I'll be able to have teens take over the editing duties, which would free up a lot of my time. We use Free Music Archive for our musical transitions. The teens voted from several options from this site, and for consistency, we use the same musical clip during each episode. How do people access your podcast once you have finished editing? Again, with the Innovation Grant, the library pays for our episodes to be hosted on SoundCloud. Using iTunes is a free option that is available as well. As with Adobe Audition, there was a small learning curve in working with SoundCloud, but it's not too difficult to master. Their help desk is very responsive. When I had an issue, they got back to me the same day via email. Take some time to research your options to see what hosting method will work best with your library system. Besides the equipment and software, what else do you need for establishing a teen podcast? Time. I mentioned earlier the time it takes to edit using Adobe Audition. I am so grateful to my branch manager for supporting me and allowing me to have the time to work on this project. I strongly recommend having a conversation with your supervisor to make sure they realize the time involved in producing a podcast. I estimate the total time involved to produce a 1-hour episode to be anywhere from 25 to 30 hours. This includes the editing time I discussed earlier, and also all the planning time, emailing students, setting up the Zoom meetings, contacting potential interviewees, recording interviews, preparing the podcast transcript and show notes, uploading to SoundCloud, and advertising our podcast with our school community, social media, and other contacts. Once you have started your podcast journey, you will want to make sure you can show the impact of your program. YALSA's Teen First Basic Learning Outcomes can be a helpful guiding document as you decide what it is you want teens to achieve. Make sure to keep track of your time spent, your download statistics, and other metrics so you can measure your success and report back to your library stakeholders. A survey can be useful to gauge listener feedback and teen learning outcomes as well. From our efforts with HoCoCast, we can say, Creating a library podcast has helped teens to learn how to use podcasting tools and technologies, to develop interview skills, to engage in personal expression, to create connections with other teens outside of their normal spheres, to develop time management skills, and to build confidence. I have included a link to our current episode of HocoCast. I hope you will find it inspiring. Please reach out using the email address on the screen if you have any follow-up questions or would like samples of our editorial guidelines, storyboard, and permission form. Thanks so much for watching.